with her, and we're living together. They live in a house there in Missoula, and yeah, and then I got to visit with some family, so it was nice to check on our Temple Beth, I mean Northern congregants. Hal and Sean don't come on Torah study, but they do come on for Shabbat, and we were with them not last Friday. Last Friday we were in Minnesota, but the Friday before we were in we were there before we got to Missoula for Shabbos. But yeah, an interesting time and place to see some of our friends and family. So it was nice, and again, got to be you know got to got to see some of our friends. Oh, um, Floyd just texted me. It's September 2nd that it's the. I think it started in January, whatever. I don't. So it's September. So it's not there that long, not much longer. We'd have to do it over the summer. So I'm hoping to get over there. I was going to go with my sister a few weeks ago to the exhibit. She had tickets and couldn't end up going. Um, but I know, but I want to make sure. I don't want to get everybody out there and then it turns out it stinks. No, I look like if I feel responsible. Look, when I do a trip, whether it's to Israel or somewhere else, we did our European trip a few years ago. About 10 years ago, we did a Temple Beth Ami trip to Eastern Europe. I did it first. I went on the trip first to make sure that it would be good, a good experience for everybody. You know, I wanted to make sure that I like to go first to make sure that it's yeah. I feel like I have to scout it out to some extent. I feel responsible. I feel responsible. I do trust you, Mike. You just didn't give it a laudatory enough recommendation. But yeah, I like to make sure I'm prepared because you asked me a question this morning I didn't even know the answer to. So Mike asked me what the biblical name for Qumran is because Qumran is the Arab the name from the Arabic period. It's not wasn't called Qumran during the biblical or during the rabbinic period and called the Greco-Roman period. It wasn't known as that. It was called Sakaka, which doesn't sound like a great name, by the way. I would have definitely changed the name from Sakaka. But yeah, that's the name for Qumran in the Bible. We think it's a possibility. It may not be the case, actually. We don't. There's so much about Qumran that we don't know that's, open to speculation. I think sometimes, by the way, with regards to Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's such an amazing find that I think some people like still don't believe that it is what. And looked at it. Yeah. So again, part of it is it's just miraculous what was found there. And so people in some cases I think that there's like obvious things that and again, I don't want to say you always have to go with the obvious answer, but some of the speculation that surrounds Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls is that, like, for example, that the people, they found a scriptorium there. They found a place where scrolls would be written. And yet there's people who still maintain that the scrolls for the community were not written there. Yeah, of course. I mean, so that would make sense. Some books were written there, some scrolls were written there, and some were not. But the obvious answer that some of the scrolls were written in Qumran seems to me to be obvious. But there are people who go nuts with it. Then there's people who speculate that the Qumran community was actually a nascent Christian community that was we can't date it as early as we should, and so that these were actually Jewish Christians. I mean, again, there's answers that seem like they're obvious answers, which people don't want to go with because it just seems almost too easy to put it all together. Yeah. Yeah, I believe that that's the case. Yeah, I mean, I believe that the scrolls became a library and became to some extent not even a library, but like a rescue mission. Like, let's get these scrolls out of Jerusalem. Let's get these scrolls into a place where the Romans won't easily find them. Yeah, well, whether or not they thought, I know I don't believe that they thought they'd never go back and get them, right? I don't think they thought they'd leave them there for 2,000 years, but yeah, I do believe they thought they would come back and get them, and would be hard to find, which they were. They weren't found for 2,000 years. Um, so I'm not sure how much of Ecclesiastes we're going to finish today. I mean, it's possible we'll finish today. There's about six more chapters, and we're not going to rush through it, but just to refresh everybody's memories from a few weeks ago when we read this first two readings of it. So we read about three chapters each week. The Ecclesiastes is in some ways the most unusual book of the Bible in that it is really more philosophical. It does have pithy one line sayings, but most of the sayings are not one liners, and they're not like Proverbs in that way. But they're similar in it's a wisdom literature book. Clearly, there's wisdom being imparted here. But what's interesting is the wisdom is definitely not like other wisdom sayings of the Bible, and it almost has a different philosophy to the rest of the Bible. In that, number one, there's not a lot of ritual or theological sayings in it. There's not a lot of things that we would point to and say this is a religious text, which is why it doesn't make its way into our liturgy very often. It doesn't. It's not like psalms that we say every day. It's not like a lot of the other beautiful lines of the Bible that were incorporated into tefillah, into prayer. You won't find that in Ecclesiastes for the most part. There are definitely sayings in here that have been excerpted and have found their way into other places, but for the most part, it's difficult because the feeling of Ecclesiastes is a lot more well. Some people would say it's darker. I wouldn't say it's darker. It's definitely pragmatic, and it also seems to be trying to remind people that yeah, life sometimes doesn't seem fair, and the rest of the Bible wants to give answers for how people can live a life that will be free of suffering and like you do the right thing, right things will happen back. Ecclesiastes doesn't say that. It actually kind of says the opposite. But at the same time, obviously, there's a reason why we have this book, and there's a reason why so many people have been inspired by it. And we do traditionally read it on the holiday of Sukkot, which is right after the high holidays. And I, you know, I'll be honest. The last time that I read through this and studied it with people was probably over 10 years ago when I was in my mid 40s, and now that I'm in my mid 50s, it definitely has a different feeling for me to read this as opposed to when I've read it in the past. And so the mortality of this book, the focus on mortality, the theme, and we're going to see it right here in this first line of chapter 7, uh, is it's pretty powerful to say the least, and it forces us to confront issues that we sometimes would rather not confront. But as Ecclesiastes remembers, this will this is for our own good, if you will. And so let's take a look at chapter 7. So, Rosemary, it's good to see you this morning. And if you would be so
Sure.
kind to start us, and for all those who are with us, I know we're up on Facebook right now. So it's good to have everybody back.
A good name is better than fragrant oil, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, for that is the end of every mortal, and the living should take it to heart. Vexation is better than revelry, for though the face be sad, the heart may be glad. The wise are drawn to a house of mourning, and the foolish to a house of merrymaking.
So these four lines kind of go together. Um, in Well, I'm not saying that they were all written by the same person at the same time. There does seem to be a possibility of that. Um, the first three lines all begin with the same word, as you can see, tov, good. It's good. Now, of course, and then the last line says the lev hachamim, the wise, the lev hachamim, or I mean, the translation will be a little different in the King James. What does the King James say? Lev hachamim. Yeah, the heart of the wise. But the first three words, the first three lines all begin with the same word, with tov. Um, the only translation that's kind of like right there at the beginning, you see the word good is the first one. But you could go good, it is good. What does the King James have for the first three lines? And what does the second one say? A good. Oh, so the King James did not translate tov the same way. So they didn't translate it. The translation we have here is pretty close to the King James, actually. Um, but yeah, the word tov, you can see, is the first word of each. I mean, it's possible that the three lines are all together, and then the last line, kind of um, wasn't. But um, but yeah, those words in Hebrew kind of stand out with the fact that it's a it's a strange way to start a line about death. It's a strange way to reflect on things that are inherently sad and depressing, to say they're good, right? That's not the way you normally would see it. That's not what you were expecting, if you will. It's good to go to a funeral or to a shiva. It's better than going to a party, to like a wedding or bar mitzvah. You know, it's a strange thing to say, and again, to translate it is better. Is it is makes sense because you're comparing two things. Uh, but yeah, these are lines that definitely set a tone for serious reflection, and to take away from this, obviously, and it's to some extent it's the theme of the book, but also something we're going to see today in this last part of, no matter what, this is the last part of the book. I mean, the book, however much we go through today, this is definitely one of the themes, is this kind of confronting mortality. And there's definitely an idea here, which is, think about it, take it to heart. I mean, that's the translation that they use. But it's one of these kind of like things where when somebody tells you it's not what you expect, it doesn't. This is not what it appears. That's kind of the message, right? You don't. This is not what you're seeing is not, at the face of it, what's really going on. And that's a really, if you think about it, that is a very sophisticated way of teaching people something, or reminding something. When you're telling somebody what you're seeing is not really the case, even to the level of, for the face may be sad, but the heart may be glad. There's an interesting thing there, which again, is it superficial, right? Are the feelings that you see, are they actually what's really going on? And so there's a level here of, it's a very sophisticated way of thinking about life, and to thinking about our feelings, and to think about our interactions with other people, that what you see is maybe not what's really going on. And that's not something you necessarily would expect to find in the Bible, because this is when you get to, sophisticated literature or sophisticated, a sophisticated work of art where this is not what you're seeing is not what you're about to be. It's about to flip on you, right? Or the person you thought was innocent was really the guilty one, right? It's one of those things where, this is not simplistic, right? This is not, here are the heroes and here are the villains and watch what happens. This is, yeah, you may be surprised, right? There's going to be a twist at the end. Um, and again, going through life, you're going to see things that don't make sense and don't think that what you see is really what's necessarily happening. So that's a very sophisticated statement when you think about it. It's not, um, it's not what you expect in the. I think what a lot of people expect from the Bible, which is just tell me what we're supposed to do. Obviously, a lot of the Bible is pretty literal and everything is what it seems, but not always. And this book in particular is not is telling you don't always believe what you see in front of you. Um, and don't be surprised if you have a feeling that may not be what you're supposed to feel. It's yeah, it's uh there is there's definitely, again, some stuff you're going to see today like this. By the way, um the next line, the line 5, goes back to the word tov. So, this isn't the last time we'll see the words tov introduce a line. It's not the first time in Ecclesiastes, and it's also, again, kind of the way when you're giving wisdom literature to, or when you're giving wisdom to somebody, you say it's good to do this, or it's better to do this than that. It's kind of the way you introduce a maxim or a line of wisdom is, it is a fine thing to, whatever. And then you follow with what you're going to tell people. So, this is not, doesn't, the system for this, the setting for this makes complete sense.
It is better to listen to the reproof of someone wise than to listen to the praise of fools. For the levity of the fool is like the crackling of nettles under a kettle, but that too is illusory.
And by the way, that's that word that we have throughout, havel. So the word havel here is translated as illusory, but it's also vanity. I think vanity, by the way, would be just as good, if not better, a translation there. Right? Gamze havel. This is also a waste of time. Right? Right. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at this, you're kind of saying, well, there's another translation, right? Levity may not be the other way of the only way of understanding that word, right? It's praise. So it is when you praise somebody, or when you're hearing praise from from a fool, from a stupid person, it's useless. It's nothing.
Avel is the same word we use for able.
What
Same
was
thing.
that?
Avel is the same word we use for able.
Yeah,
Avel.
it's the same name, right? It's
Okay.
havel. Breath. It's nothing. There's nothing there. Yeah.
For cheating may rob the wise of reason and destroy the prudence of the cautious. The end of a matter is better than the beginning of it. Better a patient spirit than a haughty spirit.
Mm-hmm. And there again, you have the word tov at the beginning of that line, right? It's better um, to have the end than the beginning, which kind of again goes back to the theme that we had at the beginning of this passage, which it's better to get to the end. Um, and then the last part of it, though, it's better to have a patient spirit than a haughty spirit. I don't know. Haughty is necessarily the only way. It could be arrogant, or haughty is, I guess, keeps the sense of being. Gavoha means high, to have a high value of yourself. Um, there's definitely, that understanding that it's a high level of thinking about yourself rather than the word erech, which means they translate as patient. What's the King James for that line? For better a patient spirit than a haughty spirit? Proud in spirit, yeah. Um, the word erech is definitely has a understanding of being patient, you know, because the word erech actually means in Hebrew, orech means long. So we say erech panim, we say God is long, is patient, is long in face, long, doesn't react, if you will. But the word long in Hebrew, erech, is what we say for length, right? What's interesting about this is that the word in Hebrew has it's a much more sophisticated and complex phrase because erech ruach versus gavoha spirit. Think about what it means in Hebrew. You don't get it in English. Have a long spirit rather than a high spirit. Erech and gavoha can be understood as height versus length. And so it's an even better play in Hebrew because they're saying it's better for you to be, and they know the word erech ruach means a long spirit, right? Is a long in patience, but the imagery is wonderful. Better have a long spirit than a high spirit. And by high spirit, they definitely don't mean like I'm a happy person, but mean full of themselves, going like proud. So that's an interesting way of looking at it, and even I guess a more powerful way is when you think about what the Hebrew means. Better be long than high. Sorry, long than high. And so it's a wonderful phrase, right? And for the meaning and also for the play on words there that you completely miss this in English, and it's a wonderful phrase. The first part of the phrase is also obviously powerful in that the beginning of something is not as good as as the the end. The end is better, which is weird too, because you'd think like, oh, I'm going to read the end of the book, not the beginning of the book. The end of the book is better. That's probably true, but on the other hand, you better be patient and get to the end of the book because you have to have patience as well. So it's a great phrase, but there also goes with the theme that kind of don't be afraid of the end, if you will. All right, let's keep going.
Don't let your spirit be quickly vexed, for vexation abides in the breasts of fools. Don't say, how has it happened that former times were better than these? For it is not wise of you to ask that question.
That's a great line. That's one of my favorite lines in all of Ecclesiastes. It's one of my favorite lines in the whole Bible because the Bible is all about looking back. It's all about what happened to our ancestors, right? It's all about the past. You read these stories. When they read these stories, when whoever wrote Ecclesiastes was looking back on whatever, it wasn't as far away as it is for us today. And even he said, don't look back and say why were things better then? It's not a smart question. That's what it says. It's not a smart question. It's not wise. It's not chacham. It's a wonderful phrase, and it's a wonderful phrase to see in the Bible. Because again, the Bible is seen as important because it was ancient. But the Bible actually contains a quote which undermines that very idea, at least from the standpoint of, but it was better then. They're saying, well, that's a kind of a stupid thing to say. So the Bible actually says that. And I always wondered again when people say, well, it would be, I'm not saying our religion doesn't because our religion really doesn't, but there is this kind of like obviously nostalgia that exists in some forms of our religion where people say, if only we could live back in those days, right? Which is sometimes, it's sometimes enforced with certain kinds of dress. I'm not going to say what groups do that, but we have groups like the Amish, obviously, that dress in similar dress, by the way, that harken back to the 1700s. Like it would be better if we lived in Germany or Poland of the 1700s.
Nice.
The Bible actually says that's a stupid thing to say. Now, it doesn't say that you're wrong. It doesn't say that there might not be aspects of the ancient ways that were ancient times that were better, but it says it's a stupid thing to say. First of all, it's a stupid thing to say because you can't go back. You just can't. You can't. Yes, that's right. We can't yet, Mike. But it doesn't actually say that. It doesn't say because you can't, but I think it would be obvious for us to say that's one of the reasons why. But they're also saying, maybe it wasn't. maybe it wasn't better then. And so those are possibilities. And I think that for people who try to use nostalgia as a way of making people feel either bad for the way they're living now or make them think that that going backwards is going forwards. That's a different question, though, Mike. Would you do something differently if you knew? That's a different question, right? So changing your own behavior based on which you also can't do, but you can learn from your mistakes. Yeah, you can learn from your mistakes. But they're actually saying former times, right? Better if you lived in those days, and that's what it means by Hayamim Harishonim, like in the early days. Rishonim really means like the beginning days. Like Rishon means like at the beginning. But let's just say earlier days, whatever. I'm not going to say you can't. It has to be those. But going backwards, the Bible is kind of telling us is not a good way to go. And so be careful, I would say, of people who tell you it would be better if we lived back in those days. So that's a phrase, again, the word tov is there as well, right? Tovim, right? The next verse also has tov in it.
Wisdom is as good as a patrimony, and even better for those who behold the sun. For to be in the shelter of wisdom is also to be in the shelter of money. And the advantage of intelligence is that wisdom preserves the life of the one who possesses it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting phrase because, again, not necessarily connected with the previous section. I mean, these two lines, which again has the word tov there, tova. But it goes with this idea that wisdom is a very important thing to have, even more so than a patrimony, which is a fancy way of saying an inheritance, right? The word nachala means literally an inheritance. It's your inheritance. And they're saying that wisdom is better than that, right? Because, again, wisdom can also lead to success. It can lead to financial success. The translation here is going to say, wisdom leads to success financially, right? And so if you're saying, hey, would you rather be rich or smart? It's saying be smart because, of course, wealth you can spend very fast. But if you're smart and you know how to manage your wealth and you know how to accumulate wealth, you're going to be much more successful long term. So, it's better to be wealthy. Smart than wealthy. So there's definitely an understanding that wealth can go away and that wisdom will preserve your life because you'll figure out how to, get out of a problem if one arises, right? Because if you just give somebody wealth, and this happened unfortunately you can just look at Jewish history. If you were a wealthy person who lived in in Germany in 1938, you might have thought my money will get me out of, the Holocaust. And I friends whose family members said this. It did not, right? The people who got out, who had the foresight to say, no, I'm going to get out. They lived, and the people who thought their wealth would save them were wrong. And this was, again, I mean, in some cases they could have bought their way out, but they said, well, my wealth is here in Germany. I can't leave my company. I can't leave my buildings. I can't leave and of course, all that stuff ended up getting taken away anyways. And I know people who that happened to their families. So you can point to recent history to show that this is definitely the case. And yeah, it's a nice thing to remind ourselves that whatever money we have or whatever money we've inherited, we have to be pretty smart with it. We have to understand that, again, money comes and goes, but wisdom will lead us, in the right direction, and that's what we should really value. So that's money cannot buy us love. It also is one of the reasons why Jews disproportionately spend money on education. Right? We educate our families so that they can hopefully have that wisdom. Again, obviously, we've put a lot of emphasis on colleges and universities to impart that wisdom. It's not the only place where people can get wisdom, and it's definitely, unfortunately, not always the case that people are getting wisdom in their universities, but as we've seen. But there's also the ability to be exposed at university to many different kinds of people, and maybe along the way, meeting other people and having connections is another form of wisdom and gives us more access. So I always tell people, yeah, okay, I get it, but there's other advantages to being in that environment. So wisdom is definitely, it doesn't make any surprise to us that any question that this kind of line will be here, that it is important to have that. Do not worry about your inheritance, if you will, because that's not going to protect you. And we're going to continue along those lines.
Consider God's doing. Who can straighten what has been twisted? So, in a time of good fortune, enjoy the good fortune. And in a time of misfortune, reflect. The one no less than the other was God's doing. Consequently, mortals may find no fault with God.
Now, one could argue this is the most important line in the whole book, right? And it's definitely one of the most important lines about theodicy in the Bible, right? And theodicy mean, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? The Bible just said all of it is God's doing. Now, again, for some people, this is a difficult line to swallow. Judaism definitely says that this is a fact. People don't like that because they want everything good to be from God, and if it's something bad, then it wasn't God. But Judaism says it's all God. And so the Bible very clearly says that it's all God. This wasn't the devil's doing. This wasn't evil, some unconnected force to God. This is all God. So if that's the case, we can't say, well, this is God when this happens. It's all God. So it's not God doing one thing to us. It's an interesting takeaway because you could also say, again, it's all God. So it is God's fault when something bad happens. The reason that it's a tough one because when we hear somebody is dead, the proper response that we say when we hear that someone dies in Judaism is Baruch Dayan HaEmet. That's why you see when you see an announcement of somebody dying, it'll say BDE on the card or on the underneath. BDE means Baruch Dayan HaEmet, which means God is the judge of truth. God is the judge of truth. And we read it in the Talmud class. We read that this line is what you're supposed to say. Because we believe as Ecclesiastes tells us, that if it's all God, then it was God's decision that this person would be dead. And we don't know why. The Bible doesn't say we know why God did it, but we also have to say this isn't separate from God. And so we actually force ourselves to say the words Baruch Dayan Emet when we hear somebody died. We're also supposed to say that when something good happens to us too. Baruch Dayan Emet, that God did something good for us, or we feel something good has happened to us, whatever. It's God's doing too. So this is a tough one for people who can't or don't want to process that everything, if everything's from God, then God isn't doing bad or good to us. It's a tough one. It goes against what we like to think that, is God punishing us on this moment? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't say that, but I mean, some people feel some kind of support or confidence in feeling that it's still part of there's a system to it. Ecclesiastes doesn't say that. Ecclesiastes didn't say that just now. It didn't say there's a system to it. It will say that at the end, by the way, but it hasn't said that yet. And most people think that that line was not written by the person who wrote everything else here. We'll get to that when we get to the end. But this line basically says, it's all God. And it's not God punishing us necessarily. It doesn't say it's not, but it doesn't say it is. Right? And here's the line.
In my own brief span of life, I have seen both these things. Sometimes someone good perishes despite their goodness, and sometimes someone wicked endures despite their wickedness.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the line. I mean, it's not just, good and bad, whatever. He just said it happens. Now, you may not like his takeaway here, but
So don't overdo goodness and don't act too wise, or you may be dumbfounded. Don't overdo wickedness and don't be a fool, or you may die before your time. It is best that you grasp the one without letting go of the other, for those who fear God will do their duty by both. Wisdom.
wait. So that's kind of the end of that. That's kind of
Okay.
the end of that little reflection, which again ends with another tov.
That is
It's good.
kind of saying that there's a place for foolishness in your life. And
Yeah. And also don't think that you're so smart that you figured it out.
right.
Right. That's what I take away from it. Right.
Mm.
Don't think you figured it out, which is a very humbling situation.
Yes.
Right. Fearing God here, right, which is the word Yirei Elohim, Yirei Elohim, fear of God. The translation to do their duty, which is Yatsa Yedei or Yatsa. What's the King James translate Yatsa? Yeah, at the end of 18. Yeah, fear of God shall come forth from them all. Which it's missing something. So the translation, it's confusing. But the word yetzeh means to come out, right? Yetzeh, like Yetziat Mitzrayim, to come out of Egypt. The word yatzah in Hebrew means to come out. And we in Hebrew do say yatzah when you're yotzeh, you've been freed, right? Which means you've done it. You've completed it. So if you're yotzeh mitzvah, it means you did it, right? So if you're commanded to go to the mikvah and you do it, you're yotzeh. You did it. You checked it off.
And
So,
Mark,
yeah.
Yotze, I don't remember the exact word, but after you finish Shiva,
Yeah, you're yotzeh.
isn't that?
You
But
actually
isn't
say
there?
you're yotzeh. You're
Yeah.
yotzeh mitzvah. So you've done it. So what's interesting is that if you hold these truths to be self-evident, if you understand these things and don't, then and you fear God and you understand, hey, it's out of my control to some extent, or I can't figure it out, you're okay. I mean, that's why they translated as he do your duty, because they say post biblically. It definitely is post biblical in the sense that in the Talmud, we already see the word yotze. But they're saying we don't know for sure that it's like that in the biblical sense, but it seems to make sense, right? Yotze et kulam, that you've kind of done your due diligence, or you don't have the answer, but you've done the right thing. That's really what it's saying, is that if you look at the world and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense, I haven't figured it out. Now that goes back to the Job philosophy, which is that you just don't understand it. Ecclesiastes pushes, as I told you, pushes it one step further, which is there doesn't seem to be a reason to this. Not that you don't know it, but there might not be. Which, by the way, it doesn't say that there's no God. It actually says in that line, Yirah Elohim, the fear of God means that you're okay with it. So there's a certain, I don't control it, right? I don't control it, right? And I don't control it means that I can't do enough good deeds to get out of it. And that's a really important idea, because when it says al tchi tzaddik harbe, it doesn't mean like don't do good things, right? Just like, again, don't overdo wickedness either, but don't think that your good deeds are going to get you out of something bad. And that's a really, really important line for us to be reminded of. And it's something that, again, when we look at our lives, and it doesn't say, by the way, doing religious things. It says tzaddik, doing righteous things, doing justice, doing the good things. Giving our money to the poor, it would fall under the tzaddik stuff. Doing nice things for people and helping them would all be acts of tzedakah. We translate it as charity, but it's not. It's doing the right thing. It's doing the good things to people. If we do those things all the time, that's great. But don't think it's going to get you out of it. It says, the phrase actually is, again, that you would be questioning it. Because if you do all these good things and you look at God and say, I'm doing all these good things, why are good things not happening to me? You're going to be in that situation, is what it says. Because at a certain point, like if your calculation is that if I do just enough, if I do a little bit more good, I'm going to get out of the bad stuff that's happening to me, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. You're never going to find that level of goodness that gets you out of suffering. Again, it's a very heavy thing, and it's something that is in the Bible. So when people say to me, well, how did you come up with this philosophy for life? I said, well, it's in the Bible. If anybody wants to be a smart aleck about it, you can say, well, it's in the Bible. Why do you have this attitude that if I do lots of good things, I'm going to get out of stuff? Again, this is the basis, and I mean, he wrote about it, and unfortunately he just passed away. But this is what Harold Kushner wrote about when he wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Not why. A lot of people say it's when bad or why bad things happen. It's not. He says when bad, because it's inevitable. And so he really did the book to some extent to deal with his own grief, because he had a son who was born with progeria, and which is the disease where your child ages in front of you. It was a horrible disease, and so he thought to himself, I'm a good person. I'm a rabbi. I do good things for all. I try to do good things for people all the time, and so he kind of had to write this book out of his own suffering. And he, kind of comes to a conclusion that's kind of in line with Ecclesiastes, and he was definitely influenced by Ecclesiastes as a traditional rabbi. But he kind of came up with a articulated. It's not, he didn't invent it, but it's a kind of a feeling that, God doesn't allow creates a system where God doesn't interfere with people's suffering and doesn't stop suffering. It's a finite. God has a finite level of omnipotence, essentially, and God doesn't do that. So, but it's definitely in line with Ecclesiastes and with you know he would never have written that book without Ecclesiastes. So, um, yeah, keep that in mind. This line here pretty much sums up, again, there's a biblical text you can hang this on. Why does this happen? We're not 100% sure, but it's best not to it's best to keep in mind that there's things out of our control, and don't think that if you just do one more good thing, it doesn't say don't do good things. It just says don't do them with the hope that you're going to get out of something. So back to wisdom.
Wisdom is more of a stronghold to someone wise than 10 magnets that a city may contain. For there is not one good person on earth who does what is best and doesn't err. Finally, don't pay attention to everything that is said, so that you may not hear your slave reviling you. For well you remember the many times that you yourself have reviled others.
Yeah, and it's an interesting phrase. It's one that, again, doesn't seem to make sense to us, those of us who don't have
Well,
slaves.
we all have subordinates, or
Yes,
most of us
we
do.
all have people who've worked for us
We all have
and
people
who
who work for us.
maybe talk about us in not flattering ways.
Yeah. Even your kids, they'll say, "Oh, I hate you. You're the worst mom in the world."
Yeah, no, that's true. You're 100% right. Sometimes it's our kids. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that one. That's for sure. But yeah, it is a very humbling thing to think about. And again, as it said, there's nobody who doesn't make mistakes, but also don't pay attention to everything that's said about you, because guess what? You've said some unflattering and unsubstantiated things about other people. So if you have done that, then somebody's probably doing it to you. Not that it's right? It's not to say that this is a good thing, but it's a real thing, and it's something that we've all dealt with. So it is, it is, it is reminding you of, a need to be humble and to be patient and to be not, not reactive to everything. It's a really important thing that again everybody needs to think about. And again, I think the more responsibilities and the more work that we do, where we're interacting with more and more people, we have to remember that. Yeah, it's wild. It's wild that, yeah, it's wild to see. It's wild to see this play out in our own day, in our own ways, with our own with the things that we do. But it's also,
And
gosh,
they
we're
even
seeing it.
have Facebook.
We're seeing, yeah, I know, but that's not what I was thinking about, Rosemary. I was thinking about the fact that we have a leader right now who reacts to everything, not everything,
True.
but when bad things are said to him, like,
Yes.
why did you react to Bruce Springsteen saying anything to you about, like, what do you care? Let it go. But, it's so
Yes.
bizarre that we live in this time. But, yeah, it's actually, again, a cautionary tale of not reacting to everything that somebody says about you. Anyways, definitely we can learn, not from just others, right? From ourselves. Learn from yourself. Learn from how you've reviled others. Again, it's such a sophisticated way of not just teaching somebody and telling somebody what to do, but reminding them of their own actions and what they can learn from their own behavior. Yeah.
All this I tested with wisdom. I thought I could fathom it, but it eludes me. The secret of what happens is elusive and deep, deep down. Who can discover it? I put my mind to studying, exploring, and seeking wisdom and the reason of things, and to studying wickedness, stupidity, madness, and folly. Now I find more bitter than death the woman who is all traps, whose hands are fetters, and whose heart is snares. He who is pleasing to God escapes her, and he who is displeasing is caught by her.
Yeah, this is an interesting line that got thrown in there where you're like, what's he talking about? Is this his own life? Is this something symbolic? Is this,
Is this the maybe the opposite spirit of the female wisdom?
could be, right? And that's the one of the traditional ways of like kind of saying, yeah, that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about a specific woman. Um, and yeah, I think, I mean, I'd like to think
I
that's
would
what
like to think that's
yeah,
what he means, and that he's not just going off on
he's
some
just not talking about
on women
his
because
wife
some
who's
woman did him wrong.
exactly, his wife is just doesn't stop. Uh, but both of them are possible, but
Right.
there is this understanding that you know that also could be not a great situation. Look, I think I like to think that it's a more symbolic understanding of the way that we get trapped into thinking that it becomes paralyzing. But yeah, I mean, it's possible that he's talking about his own personal experience at home. But again,
It certainly can be seduced by a bad idea.
sure, exactly. And this is where again
Mhm.
it becomes personal, if you will.
See, this is what I found, said Kohelet, item by item, in my search for the reason of things. As for what I sought further but did not find, I found only one true human being in 1,000, and among all these I did not find a truly compatible woman. But see, this I did find. God made human beings plain, but they have engaged in too much reasoning.
Yeah. And for a really smart person to have said this is pretty surprising
Yeah.
because he's basically saying, look, and this is why we think it's Solomon, right? Because Solomon had 1,000 wives, right? He had a lot of women. And as a
I think
king, he
it
would
would
have
have
known
been better if he'd had one and tried to understand her.
that's true. That might be true. Though he does seem to be talking about, yeah, the one woman who could really make life hard for him. But because it doesn't say he had 1,000 wives, there's 1,000 people.
Right.
Um, and overall, as a king, he would have come into contact with lots of people, and he doesn't really find anybody. A 1 in 1,000 are quality people. It's an interesting thing to it's obviously a kind of a disappointing thing to hear, and it's one where again he says, "Look, I thought about it. I've thought a lot about stuff. I've tried to figure stuff out." And then he when he says that maybe 1 in 1,000 people um, is 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 uh, is somebody that, and again that none of them are women is obviously not a great thing to put forth. But again, if it is a Solomon or if it's somebody who was with a lot of women, then yeah, maybe the whole exercise of having 1,000 women means that you're not going to find one woman who really trusts you. Why would any woman trust you if they know that you really don't care that much about them and you have nothing vested in them? Generally speaking, women don't.
You got to take a number.
Yeah, generally speaking, women don't respond well to that kind of situation. Um, but this idea that
Well,
on one hand, there's not a lot of quality people. I'm not going to disagree with that. But on the other hand, he almost says it doesn't I've been overthinking it too. So what if your job is going around analyzing everybody and trying to figure out whether they're really worth your time? You're probably again overthinking it. But they're look, if his words of advice are, listen, this is what I've observed and this is what I'm sharing with you. Okay, fine. That's actually maybe now makes more sense, which is, okay, granted, most of the people you're going to come in contact with, you can't trust. On the other hand, don't overthink it, because not that, you should trust them, but okay, fine. I agree with you. But what are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and try to figure out how to deal with every single person? You're going to figure it out. An AI, you're running an AI simulation on everybody that you're going to come in contact with and figure out who you can trust. Look, at the end of the day, he's pretty much saying, really don't trust anybody. But at the same time, okay, that's where we're at. That's who we have around us, and don't overthink it. It doesn't mean don't be nice to people. It doesn't mean don't like other people. It means, okay, fine. I'm not going to argue with you. So, and I've had this discussion with people before, especially when people are disappointed with the people around them or people that they've interacted with, and they say, I'm disappointed. And it doesn't mean that people should, despise the people that they're disappointed in, but also say, okay, fine, I get it. And again, I say that I'm getting to an age now where this is becoming more and more an issue. So, it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem for, yeah, I think about this a lot. That's all I'm going to say. I think about it a lot more than I used to. And, yeah, I will say in general, I will also say that I'm very lucky that I'm married to a woman who, is like the women that are described in Proverbs, that are women of valor. So, I'm lucky in that way.
Interesting to if you take the traditional view that this was written also by the guy who wrote Women of Valor, right?
Exactly, Rosemary, that the same person could have said both things. That's the tradition, right?
That's
Solomon wrote
yeah.
Solomon wrote it all, that he wrote Proverbs when he was younger. Maybe he was writing it about the same woman. That's even weirder. No, I
hope not. That would be awful.
I don't think so. I don't believe that's the case. But I will tell you that I don't believe they're written by the same people, but they're both in the same book.
Right.
And there is this. There are times when we feel like this, and that's what's amazing about this book, is that it's there for us to open up and to see it in that moment where we're really feeling like, man, I don't need this. That you see this and you go, wow, it's a biblical basis for my feeling, and that it's okay. And at the end of the day, it's going to be okay, right? And don't overthink it. You can think about it, but don't overthink it. I mean, don't engage in too much thought over this, because it is what it is. This is what the situation is. So it's a wonderful way of coping with our disappointment in our lives, in our feelings like we're doing enough. Aren't I doing enough good? And look at all the people who've disappointed me. This is all very important, and sometimes we need to hear this message. Sometimes we need to hear this message. We need to hear it a lot. We probably don't read Ecclesiastes enough, especially as we get into our later period of life, which is when again, this tradition that Solomon wrote this in the later stages of his life, in the later third of his life, if you will. All right. So again, he wrote Song of Songs when he was a young man. in his first 30 years. He wrote Proverbs in his next 30 years. And then in his last 30 years, he would have written this kind of book.
Yeah, so I guess when you notice that he's very disappointed with women, but he's also very disappointed with men too,
Oh yeah. It's
and with
not,
himself.
it's yes. And he says, look, I wasted a lot of time essentially on this. I mean, he says that. He says, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And he essentially at the end of the chapter just said, and I've spent too much time on it.
Mm.
So learn from him. Don't repeat
Thank
his
you, Roger.
mistakes, which I think are wonderful. I mean, if you think about
Yes.
it, the man who slept with over 1,000 women has told you there's no joy in that.
Yeah.
And it's easy for him to say, but he's told you you're not going to find any joy in that experience.
Right.
I understand Wilt Chamberlain. He didn't. I don't know that I'm not sure if he died a happy man, if he felt content. I'm not sure if that, but Solomon told us thousands of years ago, you're not going to find contentment in that. So let's get into chapter 8.
Who is like the sage, and who knows the meaning of the adage, wisdom lights up a person's face so that deep discontent is dissembled? I do. Obey the king's orders and don't rush into uttering an oath by God. Leave his presence. Do not tarry in a dangerous situation, for he can do anything he pleases, inasmuch as a king's command is authoritative, and none can say to him, "What are you doing?"
Now, if a king is writing this about himself
Mhm.
or about what he says
Yes.
to do, I guess it's kind of self, yeah, he's justifying his own actions, but there doesn't seem to be that. I mean, it seems to be more of a cautionary. It seems to be more of a cautionary, tone, and kind of not just for being in the presence of kings. It's being in the presence of anybody who has authority in some ways. So keep that in mind, right? Check out this line though, and then again,
One who obeys orders will not suffer from the dangerous situation. Someone wise, however, will bear in mind that there is a time of doom.
yeah. Now, the context of this is clearly of what happened before, what happened before, right? This is orders, which is why they translate it as orders, right? What's the King James translation for this, Mary? Yeah. The word is mitzvah, shomer mitzvah, right? So traditionally, this line is completely taken out of context, which, what? Yeah, it's a bad line. Uh, why? Why is it not true? Right. So one of our military people here, John Stolman, just said, I know plenty of people who are stupid who give orders, right? So yes, if it's taken in, if it's taken into consideration from the previous line, then it really does seem that way. If it's translated as someone who obeys commandments, shomer mitzvah, if they keep the commandments, they will not suffer from a dangerous situation. You can understand why someone who's orthodox would say, I'm going to be shomer mitzvah. I'm going to keep the commandments because I will not suffer from bad things. If it's taken in the context that it was originally given, yes, it seems somewhat. Uh, it's setting somebody up for listening to authority. So you when you call someone shomer mitzvah, you mean what you're saying is I'm following God's commandments, right? Um, it, it, so when we say somebody's shomer Shabbat, right? There's we're saying that there's you know somebody takes this
Sabbath
seriously.
observant.
Yeah, but um, you know this is something where, again, people have taken this kind of out of context and kind of repurposed it, if you will. But again, even in traditional Judaism, people don't like this phrase. They don't like to say, bad things will not happen to you, because it's not true, right? It's not true.
Mm.
But if you read the second half of it, it's actually saying bad things do happen, right? So how can both things even be true? And so this is an example of people traditionally who've had problems with Ecclesiastes because the lines seem to contradict themselves, and in some cases they,
We don't
yeah,
expect the Bible to hedge.
yeah, and so people have a problem with this kind of line because it seems as though both things can't be true, and there are examples of so what do people usually take away from this, of course, is that um, you have to be humble, right? You have to be obedient to God, and that um, when bad things happen, it's not necessarily because you did a good thing at another time. And that's the way people kind of make sense of that line. But again, it's one of the reasons why people have a problem with it. Um, they can take it out of context, and they can kind of read that part as a reason for doing good things. But again, it's not part of Jewish understanding that if you do good things, you're going to get out of all suffering. And this is a phrase that goes back to chapter 3.
For there is a time for every experience, including the doom, for calamity overwhelms.
Yeah, and that's the ki lechol chafetz tachat hashamayim, right? There's a time for every experience under heaven, right? And so there's this idea that bad things are going to happen. They are going to happen to you, including bad things, including, again, bad stuff.
Indeed, what is to happen is unknown. Even when it is on the point of happening, who can tell? No one has authority over the life breath. To hold back the life breath, there is no authority over the day of death. There is no mustering out from that war. Wickedness is powerless to save its owner. All these things I observed. I noted all that went on under the sun, while people still had authority over others to treat them unjustly.
Now, this is a really weird idea, but it's one that, again, is, I think, very important for us when we think about bad things happening to us, that we don't understand and we don't know when the time comes that we're going to go through something bad. There is no way of understanding that system. We don't know when it's going to happen. We'd like to. We really would like to, right? We'd like to have the date. At least I could prepare for it, right? I know when this is going to happen. We don't. There's no way to know. That's what he said. We don't know. It could happen the next day. It could happen the next minute. You don't know. You don't know. But what's interesting is that, well, we don't know when the big things happen to us that are bad. The time that the doctor tells us it's stage 9. No, I'm just joking. Stage
4.
I know.
You know that.
No, that's what was said yesterday. Stage 9. Stage 4, whatever it is that we get hit with, it's inoperable. Whatever the words that we're told, we don't know when that happens. It's about to happen. When we go to the doctor's office, I guess, and they tell us you got to come in. May have an
I'm
inkling.
going
but
tomorrow. Change the
don't- yeah,
subject.
so we have an appointment nowadays, but you never know. Um, but what we do know is that there are people who treat other people unjustly. And is that can be stopped. That should be stopped. So um again, people have authority over others and they treat them badly. And this is something that is definitely stoppable. Let's take a look.
And then I saw scoundrels coming from the holy site and being brought to burial, while such as had acted righteously were forgotten in the city. And here's another frustration: the fact that the sentence imposed for evil deeds is not executed swiftly, which is why people are emboldened to do evil. The fact that sinners may do evil 100 times and their punishment still be delayed. For though I am aware that it will be well with those who revere God, since they show reverence, and it will not be well with scoundrels, and they will not live long because they do not revere God, here is a frustration that occurs in the world. Sometimes someone upright is requited according to the conduct of a scoundrel, and sometimes the scoundrel is requited according to the conduct of the upright. I say all that is frustration. I, therefore, praised enjoyment. For only good people can have under the sun is to eat and drink and enjoy themselves. Oh, for the only good people can have under the sun is to eat and drink and enjoy themselves. That much can accompany them in exchange for their wealth through the days of life that God has granted them under the sun.
Yeah, and this is the part that blows people away. Is that he gets through the whole system of how things go wrong. People who are evil get away with stuff. People who are good suffer. People are mistreated. They don't get people don't get punished for the things that they've done wrong. They get away with it. He says, all of this I've seen. I've seen it happen. By the way, if he's king, then he's allowed it to happen. But let's not even go there. But this is, I mean, we live in a society where this
that even
happens.
a king can't make sure that only the good receive
Yeah,
the rewards and the bad get what's coming to them.
yeah. But we see it all the time. We see
Right.
perversions of justice all the time.
Mhm.
You know, we see people getting away with stuff all the time, and you know, we're like, this is happening in our society, and we know we're responsible for it. I mean, we are responsible for it. It was the thing that I said, you know, when we had, you know, when Kim Goldman was active in the temple, was coming here with her son, you know, I said we have an obligation to do what we can for her because our society let her down. Our system of laws let her down. And there's not much we can do about fixing that other than we kind of retroactively put OJ in jail for something that he wouldn't have gone to jail for. So he got a little bit of it. And I talked to her about that. That was one of the biggest public miscarriages of justice. It's hardly the most, you know, the worst. There's been people who are responsible for even more death than him who've gotten away with stuff too. So I'm gonna say it's the only example. It's just a very public example. But the problem is that it is on us. It is on us. We don't have to be the king. We don't have to be an elected official to know that this is on us. So it is on us. These things are on us. And there seems to be an almost abdication at the end of this statement, which is that, you know, so what do you do? What do you actually do? What is Tov? He says there's nothing other that we can do than eat and drink and enjoy ourselves, which is why a lot of people say this is an Epicurean. You know, this is almost like the definition of Epicureanism from the standpoint of like the simplistic understanding of Epicureanism, not the traditional Greek Epicurean philosophy. But when we say someone's an Epicurean, what do they like to do? They like to eat and drink. An Epicurean. It's much deeper than that, obviously. But what do we take away from this? That the only thing we can really do is enjoy our lives. Because if we look at the bigger system and feel a lack of control over it or a lack of justice in it, we better not use that as our way of finding peace. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not responsible for it, because it does really feel like, well, he just abdicated all responsibility. He just said, you know, I'm supposed to enjoy myself. Well, yes, you are supposed to enjoy yourself, not because that's going to get you out of the responsibility of it all, because we're definitely supposed to be responsible. We're definitely supposed to be responsible over ourselves and over our society. But if we're going to find happiness in that, that ain't going to work. If that's what's going to give us a sense of joy and fulfillment, it's not going to. And it's true, because there's no way, if you watch the news every day and you're thinking that's going to bring you enjoyment, something's broken in you. Because there's no way you could sit and watch the local news, especially the local news, and be filled with joy for that. There's no way. You literally would have to have something psychologically wrong with you, diagnosed, sociopathic behavior, to watch the news and to say, oh yeah, it's all good. This is great. Because it's not, based on what we see, based on the reports that we see, based on the worst aspects of our society. You couldn't find pleasure in that. So you have to find pleasure in fairly simple things. And it isn't your wealth, right? Because your wealth by itself is not going to bring you enjoyment. Translating that, converting that wealth into things that bring us joy in our days, on the other hand, is probably the best way to find enjoyment. So it is it's not the traditional answer. And again, as I said, the rabbis don't turn to this for explanations for how to enjoy life. It's not the traditional answer, Jewish traditional answer for how to enjoy life, because this seems to be very much about pleasure, right? Enjoyment, and not about doing good things or, taking care of your family or your friends. But to basically enjoy, sensory pleasures is what the book of Ecclesiastes just said. And it goes with the stuff that we've read from the very beginning. That's why the idea that this is written by different authors maybe there's different authors, but there's an author who's in chapter 3, chapter 1, who's also here in chapter 12. When it says Tachat HaShemesh, under the sun, that's what we've been reading the whole time, under the sun. So this isn't some different author that just popped in here to tell us this. This is the same author, and it's consistent with some of the stuff that was at the beginning. It's definitely bleaker here towards the end, in the sense that, at the end of the day, this is all you really have, and you're going to see bad stuff. When it says in chapter 3, there's a time for every experience under heaven, a time to lose, a time of war. Those are all bad things. But now it's actually said there's a time for bad things to happen to you, right? There's a time for calamity. There's a time for bad things to happen to you. You're going to have bad things happen to you. Not general terms, not, hey, there's a time for something good and there's a time for something bad. No, there's a time for something bad, and it's going to happen. And now, what are you going to do about it? Well, he said. You're not going to overthink it. You're also not going to think it's because you did something bad that you got rewarded with or punished. Now, this is your just rewards, if you will, which we, by the way, say, even if it's not a good thing. Nope, that's not it. You're going to know that there doesn't seem to be making any sense to it. But the best you can do is to finish out your life enjoying your life. Not because you have a lot of money in the bank, but because you spent it on things that you enjoy. Now, again, these are things that don't hurt anybody else. Okay? It's not hurting other people. It's also enjoying life. It's not drinking to excess and then waking up with a hangover afterwards, because that by nature would be not enjoying yourself. If you're enjoying yourself to the point of, I'm no longer enjoying this, it's not enjoyment, because it doesn't just say eat, drink, and get hungover and deal with the consequences. It says eat, drink, and enjoy yourself, which is where we get eat, drink, and be merry, right? These are the ways of going through life with those things together: eat, drinking, and being happy, being samach. Yeah. And by the way, and it says in exchange for, with a transaction, that this is, you're giving up you're going to have to give up some of your wealth in order to do that, by the way. It doesn't say you're going to eat and drink and be happy and also have all of your wealth. It actually says you're going to spend money doing it. And that's okay. And it is the stuff that has been given to us by God. The stuff, I actually should say, is your days, your time. The way you spend that, we don't know, because we don't know how many days God will give us. We don't know how many days God will give us. Asher natan lo ha-Elohim, that God has given us. Which means that our days, to some extent, are not. There's no guarantee. So, not necessarily what you expected to hear from the Bible. Yeah. When I walked through the cemetery of my family 2 days ago on Sunday, and was with my daughter Shira as we did this, she looked and said, "Oh, some of these people live to be in their..." Well, she saw my great-grandfather who lived to be in his 90s. I knew him. He died in 1978, so I was, I can't remember what it was, 1979. Anyways, she said, "Oh, there was people in our family that lived into their 90s," because her grandparents barely made it into their 70s on my side. And my grandparents, my grandmother is buried there. She died here in California. No, yeah, she did. And we buried her a couple of days later in Minnesota. She lived into her 80s, but my parents only lived into their 70s. And so she says, "We're going in the wrong direction, Dad." I go, I know. I'll be glad if I get into get through my 60s, because we're going in the wrong direction. And then and of course she said, she didn't even say that. She said, "Well, I even make it into my 50s. I said, "Look, none of us know. It's not a good sign. We're moving in the wrong direction." But when I was a kid, I thought I'd live into my 90s because I had great grandparents that lived into their 90s. And my reasoning was, "Oh, you're going to live that long." Now I know there's no guarantee. And you don't know if we're going to live tomorrow. And so all of it is, again, given by God, in the sense that whether you believe that God actually said when you were born, this is when the guy's going to die, or when you're going to die, or you understand that every day is a gift from God, you're left with the same thing, which is, I better make good use of it, and I better enjoy it. I better not put off enjoying it. And I know that my wealth isn't going to go with me into the next world. Let's read the next to this chapter.
For I have set my mind to learn wisdom and to observe the business that goes on in the world, even to the extent of going without sleep day and night. And I have observed all that God brings to pass. Indeed, human beings cannot guess the events that occur under the sun, for humans try strenuously, but fail to guess them. And even if those who are wise should think to discover them, they would not be able to guess them.
Yeah. And that's kind of the theme that you read today. We'll read one more chapter, but that's the theme for today. Try. We try very hard to figure them out. All the things that God brings to pass, Ma'aseh Elohim, the things that God does. So this is not an atheistic understanding of the world. It's not like there's no God and there's no rhyme or reason for it. There's no sense to it. This is all random. Nope. That's not here. So some people say that this is, kind of nihilistic or nonsensical, the randomness of the world. It just says we don't understand it. We can't figure it out. There isn't a system. There's no book. There's nothing. There's no guide. There's no farmer's almanac for figuring this stuff out. I mean, we're good actually at the farmer's almanac stuff now. We can predict when there's going to be weather patterns. And again, unfortunately, we had, over 20 people die last week in tornadoes and in weather situations, but we're much better at that than we used to be. But we still can't be 100%. And there are a lot of things that happen that we can't figure out. And again, smart as we may think we are not going to figure them out. Again, doesn't mean we don't try to figure things out, right? We try to get as much information as we can. But the idea that we can figure it all out, we can't. Should we try to figure it out? Yeah, absolutely. Nobody's saying you shouldn't try to, right? But to understand that we are going to figure it all out, Ecclesiastes says we're not going to. We're not. We can't figure it out. And that's what we, of course, really want to do. We want to know. We want to know when these things are going to happen. And again, he just said, you will not. It's not fair, John. And a guy who is really, really smart and who had a lot of time on his hands to try to figure it out told us thousands of years ago that we're not going to. And he's right. But it's frustrating. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't try. It doesn't mean that we don't try to know as much as we can. And again, that's the counter argument to Ecclesiastes is again, yeah, but that doesn't mean we don't try to. If we don't have that desire to try to figure it out, we wouldn't figure out what we figured out. We wouldn't figure out all the pieces of the medical mysteries that we have figured out, right? To understand that there's bacteria that kill us, or to understand that there's, a way for us to live a cleaner, a better life by washing our hands. And, those kinds of things we don't stop learning and we don't stop trying to understand it. But the idea that we are going to figure it all out also shouldn't make us frustrated and make us feel like we're failures. Because that's the other problem, is that when we don't figure something out, we feel stupid. And when we don't see something coming, we feel stupid. And he just said in a comforting way to me, you're not going to figure it out. I want to know. Of course I want to know. Try to figure it out. I mean, it's why people pay attention to their zodiac signs, or they look at their whatever. They look at their hands and study their lines on their hand. I mean, people have been doing this for thousands of years, trying to figure it out. And there does seem to be a system to it, but there isn't. He just said there isn't. Well, that's another possibility. So Mike just said it would be boring if we knew when it was, and that's possible. And if, again, it seems logical that if we knew when these things would happen, it would not be anywhere near as exciting to live, and maybe we wouldn't want to if we knew all the things that were going to transpire. If we could see the movie ahead of time, we'd watch the movie and then just, I don't need this. We get too heavy, but I think there are people who sometimes feel that way. and that's something that we're talking about in the last few days, what we're going to do in our synagogue to deal with a feeling like we've had 2 suicides in our synagogue in the last 3 weeks, for people who are virtually the same age as I am, and obviously feeling some of the same feelings that Ecclesiastes wrote about what's the point. And it gets to this interesting idea that if people feel like they've seen the way this movie ends, why stick around? Why watch it? I already know how it ends. I think that people sometimes feel that way, and it leads to some very dark thoughts and some cases, as we've seen. So we're trying to figure out how to maybe do a session about it, but more importantly, to do a session to kind of help people see the warning signs and to try to figure out how we can help. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. And again, you can take comfort in reading this and saying, we don't really know when the people around us, maybe are suffering at the level, and maybe we missed it. Maybe we missed the warning signs. But yeah, having one suicide is bad. Having a second one, within 3 weeks is now not only sad, but, seems to be like this is not an isolated occurrence. I guess you start thinking, is something happening right now? And I think there definitely are things happening in our society right now that are potentially, dangerous for all of us. And I think there's consequences to some of the bigger issues that are going on in our society and in our political world and in our. I think there's some despondency that people have with the way the system is working in our country, in our world, and But I do think back to Mike Schwartz's point, I think that when people feel that if they did feel that they knew the answer, then the way it's going to play out, would they bother doing it? Part of obviously our engagement in the world is because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and we want to see what's going to happen. We want to experience that unknown, and there's a thrill and enjoyment to that. I would say there's definitely something to think about there. But the interesting thing that kind of Ecclesiastes would say is that, well, what do we do today? Well, we enjoy ourselves. We make this day something enjoyable, and there's a balance, obviously, as we said. You can't drink so much that you cause your body to break down and to have, aphasia and all this alcohol-induced problems that people can have if they drink too much. And not to eat so much that you cause your body to go into, diabetes or all the, heart failure and all the kinds of things that we can get if we don't eat right. But because that goes against the idea, he said, of living your life, as much as you can. But there's definitely a balance. And this idea that maybe that's what we have to do is comforting in the sense that there is enjoyment to be had in the world. And by the way, it doesn't say just eat, drink, and that's going to make you enjoy yourself. It says eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. So if you have enjoyment that comes from other things other than eating and drinking, do those things too, right? Do those things too. If you like painting, do that. If you like taking photographs, do that. If you like being on your boat, do that. It doesn't say eat, drink, and therefore enjoy yourself. It says eat, drink, and enjoyment all together. Meaning that, again, eating and drinking are basic ways of enjoying yourself. But there are other ways. Or you could say eating and drinking allows you, because you're taking care of your body, to enjoy yourself. There's different ways of reading that. But understand that all three of those are equal in the sense that it's not eating and drinking, which is enjoyment, which is the way sometimes people understand it because it goes together. But just remember, they're all there. And enjoyment does not have to be eating and drinking. Yeah, John. Yeah, yeah, of course. In those days, it did. In those days, pretty much everything that you drink, with the exception of water, was alcoholic. But it doesn't necessarily, yes, it doesn't necessarily mean that. A lot of times when they say eat, drink, and be merry,
And the
people
water would kill you.
assume that people, yes, Judith, the water could kill you. But but yeah, a lot of people think that those things kind of go together, that, like, eating, drinking, and then it leads to the merriment. But it doesn't. And it doesn't say merry. It says enjoyment. It says sameach, like in simchat Torah, in enjoyment. It doesn't mean I'm drunk and therefore I'm going to enjoy myself. Though people on simchat Torah thought they had to be drunk because they really enjoy themselves. Again, I'm just saying it's definitely been understood together. It doesn't have to be, and those things are not. Eating and drinking is not necessarily enjoyment, but it is. They go hand in hand, which is why people put them on a wine glass or whatever, or they have them on their plates or whatever. Wherever you've seen the words "eat, drink, and be merry" on a sign in a restaurant, that's where it comes from. That's where it comes from originally, right? It comes from Ecclesiastes, which again is the Bible. Uh, people people are surprised that,
Mark,
it's in the Bible. But it is, my friends, that's where it comes from. So
hey, Mark,
the longer the longer version of the ones that eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you'll be dead, right? We may die. That's
Mark,
yes, sorry. Go
that's
ahead. Yes.
okay. Do Ecclesiastes is in the it's in the King James. Do
Wait. Well, hold it a second.
do Christian
Wait,
do
hold it.
Christian yeah.
Hold it. Wait. Mary's here. What does the King James say? Yes. So Mary confirmed that the King James says, "Eat, drink, and be merry." Yes. Sorry.
That's okay. Do Christian is it used in Christian liturgy at all? Ecclesiastes?
Let me uh let me be more let me be more forthright. There is a midrash on this line in Corinthians. So in Corinthians is the line, the line that says, if the dead are not raised, let us eat, drink, for tomorrow we may die. Now, Christianity almost, I don't know how to say this in a way that, like, let me just show you. So I'm only saying this because you asked the question. I mean, I'll just show you, so this is not my take on this. I just want you to, I'll just show you, like,
Because often you
I'll,
get
I'll just show you what, how the Christians played off of this.
because also you often get before you go on, you often get more of an aesthetic, not aesthetic, yes, aesthetic, but a restrained, controlled view of eating and drinking in some Christian sects. Did I say that right?
Okay.
Ascetic.
Like
Okay. So,
aesthetic, thank you.
so here's the issue. When Paul says it so this is Paul's letter to his followers, or Jesus's followers, or maybe again, kind of combination of both. But Paul is writing a letter to people in Greece, in Corinth. And he tells them that if I fought in gladiator battles in Ephesus, which was another town actually, Ephesus is in, and he wrote letters to the Ephesians. There's a book called the Ephesians. If he so Ephesus was a major a major Greek city in Turkey, in modern day Turkey. Okay, it's in Asia Minor. So he says he's actually making fun of the biblical statement on this because Paul's saying, that's not true because there's a fatality to this that he doesn't want to accept. He wants to believe that we'll be resurrected, that there is a heaven. And so he actually says there would be no point to this if there wasn't resurrection. And again, I'm just going to show you that that's, the verse highlights the implication of the resurrection for believers and the pointlessness of their action if there is no life after death. So Christianity, and for some extent, I mean, I don't want to say Judaism doesn't say the same thing. Judaism does. That there's a heaven, and so there's a place where we go after we die. So, yeah, I mean, the answer is that both Christianity or before it, Judaism said, well, yeah, it does make a difference because we go to heaven. So it doesn't matter so much whether we have fun in this world. I will say this. Paul was martyred. He was killed for his beliefs, right? There's arguments over how he was martyred, but let's assume that he was killed. All of his followers, all of Jesus's followers, all of them were killed. Their chance of going into be killed in a gladiator in an arena, I don't want to say gladiators because there weren't gladiators, they were literally thrown to the beasts, and the beasts would eat them in front of everybody and everyone would clap. And that's what the Romans did, by the way. Yeah, these were not gladiator combats. Sometimes they'd give them weapons, but oftentimes they didn't. They just threw them to the beasts and let the people watch that spectacle. So if that's your end, then saying, let us eat and drink for tomorrow we die, is a fatality to it, which is that's what's going to happen to us, because that is what was going to happen to us. So he had a reason for saying it. I'm not saying he didn't have a reason for saying it. And Jewish people who've said that at really dark times don't want to hear that, because tomorrow we may die is not a exaggeration. That could have happened to Paul. When he said that, the next day he could have been arrested and thrown into the arena. So it comes from a place. I'm explaining it because I want you to understand that Paul isn't being disrespectful to the Bible by saying it. He's just saying you can't live by that. You can't live by that. I can't live by that because my life is not good, and my life is very precarious. So that kind of attitude is not the attitude I'm going to take. And I would say, yeah, if I lived like him, I would say that. If you were living in a concentration camp in 1944, 43, you're not going to say, hey, let's eat and drink. Tomorrow we die. Right? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you say that? So they wanted and they needed to believe that there was going to be a heaven that would make up for the fact that today is not maybe much longer than I'm going to live. So understand that that's where that comes from. I only say that because you asked the question, and Christians have to deal with that line because he wrote it when he wrote it 2,000 years ago, and it's still, it's part of the Bible. It's part of their Bible. So that line makes fun of it. I will 100% concede that. Paul is slamming that theology. So you asked the question, and that's why I shared it. And again, I understand why he slammed it. I'm saying I get it. I would probably have said the same thing if I was in his situation. So, yeah. If you're eating, basically the minimum amount of stuff to keep you alive in a camp, then that's a horrible thing to tell somebody. Again, I would say it's not what it says, by the way, because Paul cut out the last part, which is have an enjoyment. If you're eating and drinking to stay alive and that's all you get, you're not going to enjoy it. Okay. Enjoyment is not part of it. It's not part of the equation. But I will say that enjoyment is something that we definitely should be focusing on, not because it makes us stupid or makes us frivolous, but because, especially in our lives today, it's one of the few things that we can do. And so you're going to see more and more people in the Jewish community in the next year, I predict. I can predict it because I've already seen people start rolling it out. We're still in the midst of a war. There's no question. We're still in the midst of a war. We see it every day. If you wake up like I do and the first thing you do is check, Jerusalem Post, we're still in a war. However, you're going to start seeing people in the Jewish community start talking about joy. And you're going to start seeing more and more people in the Jewish community focusing on Jewish joy, right? And you're going to start seeing that as the message that some people in the Jewish community will start turning to. And my guess is that by the high holidays, you're going to see this as something that, again, we hope that the war will be over by high holidays. But even if it's not, I think you're going to be seeing that more and more. I'm not, but I'm just saying, no, but I have no idea, honestly. It depends on I don't know. But I will tell you, this is the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles, which has now just started posting this. And these are things that they're now funding because the director of the Federation, Rabbi Noah Farkas, is now made his campaign to start funding Jewish joy. So these are some of the things they're doing. One Happy Camper, which are subsidies for Jewish kids to go to camp. Federation missions, Israel trips. These are all things that the Federation is doing now to get people to feel good, including this thing right here, which people don't know about. It's a honeymoon trip to Israel that you can go on, which is you can go to Israel even if you're older than 26 on a honeymoon couple trip. So I know we also have been married for a long time. You can get remarried. 30 years tomorrow, Mike and Mary. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. We'll celebrate your anniversary with you.
How many years? Mike?
30 years. Mary deserves a medal. You guys are newlyweds. I've been married for 32 years this year. 32 years. Look at me. I don't look a day over. Yeah, I was going to say 60, but 65, but whatever. She deserves a trophy, a medal. Yeah. Meanwhile, she's out on the road today. She's in Austin, Texas. You know that? She's in Austin today. Yeah. Anyways, all right, everybody. We will continue and finish up. I definitely will predictable finish up chapters 9 through 12 next week. But yeah, some heavy stuff today. But hopefully you will find some enjoyment in today. I really hope everyone does. I hope you find something that will give you some enjoyment. And it doesn't have to be eating and drinking. But if it is, enjoy it. Enjoy it wherever you are. Thank you, Rosemary. Are you up north, by the way, today, Rosemary?
Yeah, I'm at home in Campbell.
All right. Are you going up to the Sea Ranch, to the sky?
Well, we're trying to work out a date. We're thinking a weekend sometime soon.
Nice.
We were
And
up there.
Yeah, and that's another thing people do.
Fun.
They take to the highway, or they take to the sea, or they take to the air too, to find enjoyment.
I had flying lesson yesterday. I did well. My
Perfect.
landings are coming back.
That's perfect timing then. I was perfectly timed. And you're going to the Autry Museum tomorrow. Mike. That's excellent. That's a great place to go. The Autry Museum. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night for Talmud or sometime soon. Take care. And
Bye,
it's good to
everybody.
see you all again. All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, Rosemary.